welcome all of you who came from very distant places, from Guyana. What are you doing here? How'd you get here? Amazing. You're a liberated soul. Congratulations. Okay. Big surprise. Anyway, welcome everybody from distant places. Some very distant places. We're going to be discussing a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 27, spoken by Lord Kapila to Devahuti. We'll chant responsibly, but we won't go through the word for word. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Animita Nimitena Swadharmena Malatmana Tivraya Mai Bhaktya Cha Shruta Samvritaya Chiram. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha Animita Nimitena Swadharmena Malatmana Tivraya Mai Bhaktya Cha Shruta Samvritaya Chiram. Translation: The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, one can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. By thus executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction, and one will be freed from the contamination of matter. So I'm going to go back because this is Kapila Dev's response to a question that Devahuti is asking. The previous chapter 26 is called Fundamental Principles of Material Nature. That's the whole Sankhya section. At the end of the Sankhya section, Kapila Dev says, and now that we understand the self, that the individual belongs to the category of spirit, he should meditate upon the Supreme Self. And then he describes that process. In practical terms, how to, how your income should be earned and how you should live your life in very practical terms. Very practical. Not just when you're in meditation and the rest of the time you don't know what to do. You know what to do when your consciousness is fixed in that way that he's describing. And then just read just before Devahuti speaks. Text 15, the living entity can vividly feel his existence as the seer, but because of the disappearance of the ego during the state of deep sleep, he falsely thinks himself to be lost, like a man who has lost his fortune and feels distress thinking himself to be lost. When, by material nature, one can realize his individuality, then the situation he accepts under false ego becomes manifest to him. So from the susupti state, and then he gets another body. And so he's described this process of extracting the soul by knowledge and then by practical means of living. So then Devahuti says, she has a doubt. And it's like 5 verses long. Devahuti inquired, "My dear Brahmana, does material nature ever give release to the spirit soul? Since one is attracted to the other, one is attracted to the other eternally, how is their separation possible?" It's a doubt. As there is no separate existence of the earth and its aroma, or of water and its taste, there cannot be any separate existence of intelligence and consciousness. They're inextricable. One is connected with the other. One without the other doesn't have any meaning. So what's the soul without matter? And material intelligence is one of those coverings, the subtle covering of the soul, which is conscious. Hence, even though he is the passive performer of all activities, that is, material nature is carrying out activities, but the living entity is the passive performer of activities. Like the 5 factors to action described in chapter 18. So the living entity is the karta, and he makes some endeavor, cheshta, but he's the passive performer. And then the other, ultimately the super soul and the place and the instruments of action. So like, riding in a car, you're moving at 60 miles an hour, but you're just sitting still, but you're moving at 60 miles an hour. So you're the passive. Similarly, in the machine of the material nature, this body, we're the passive performer. We're the non-doer from chapter 3, verse 27, but we're the doer in the sense that we're existing. What's the body without a soul? It disintegrates. It has no meaning. So that's what she's saying. Even though he's the passive performer of all activities, how can there be freedom for the soul so long as material nature acts on him and binds him? We're so close. The connection is so close. How can you get free? Because of the proximity and the association, the inextricable involvement of the two. Even if the great fear of bondage is avoided by mental speculation and inquiry into fundamental principles, it may still appear again, since the cause has not ceased. That's the end of her question. So, I'm feeling fear of material existence. So I want liberation. And so I cultivate severe, strong austerities of detachment of the senses from sense objects, and I cultivate knowledge, and I do all those liberation-directed things, and I'm feeling some relief. But the inextricable closeness of the body, particularly the subtle body, the material intelligence, the mind, and our dear friend, false ego, it's a bungee cord. It just goes right back. We're too much intimately involved with the covering. Is it really possible to become free from that connection? The answer is yes. And the answer is through bhakti. Bhakti has the power to dissolve that connection. Read Srila Prabhupada's purport. Sridhar Swami comments in this connection that by association with material nature alone, one does not become conditioned. Conditional life begins only after one is infected by the modes of material nature. The soul being in matter it's the modes of nature. It's the affinity for being the enjoyer, that's passion, that implicates us with the modes of nature, and then it's the tar baby phenomena. We're stuck. If someone is in contact with the police department, that does not mean he's a criminal. As long as he does not commit criminal acts, even though there is a police department, he's not punished. Similarly, the liberated soul is not affected, although he is in material nature. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead is supposed to be in association with material nature when he descends, but he is not affected. One has to act in such a way that, in spite of being in the material nature, he is not affected by contamination. Example: although the lotus flower is in association with water, does not mix with the water. That is how one has to live, as described here by the personality of Godhead Kapila. Animita, nimitena, swadharmena, malatmana. There's much more. So this animita, small item, being the nimitta, the instrument that has no affinity for considering oneself to be the enjoyer of what is produced by the instrument, or without attachment to being the enjoyer of fruitive activities, even in the realm of devotional service. So, bhakti has that power. Other than bhakti, that power doesn't exist. And animita, nimitena, sva dharmena, you do your prescribed duty, exactly as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, or as Brahma says in that wonderful verse from Canto 10, Chapter 14, that Ramananda Roy spoke and Lord Chaitanya said, that's it, that's the goal of life and how to achieve it. Svanes tatak. Stay in your position. Swadharmena. That's what the next paragraph is saying. One can do it. You can be Arjuna and be a warrior. Or you can be a student, go to school. You can be a person that goes to the office. Or you can be a housewife that stays and takes care of the house and the children. Or you can be involved in matter but not affected by the modes of nature and thus entangled. It can be done through the power of bhakti. Swadharmena amalatmana. Amala, atmana. Amala means pure, spotless, without mala or contamination. Atmana, that's, the body, mind, and self. Atma. Just coincidentally, definitely was not deliberate. Coincidentally, in looking at Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on this verse, he uses a term, anta karana. Remember that one? It's from the Japa retreat. Yeah? Anta means within. Anta karana. Karana means cause. Krishna is the sarva karana. So karana means cause. And anta karana means the subtle cause, or the cause within. It's a term that, it's not in the verse, but it's a term, I'm sure it's from someplace in the Bhagavatam. I assume it's from someplace in the Bhagavatam. Vishwanath uses this term to describe the subtle body, or the subtle principle of life, like here using this example from Devahuti, is the intelligence and consciousness. They're different. This is specifically material intelligence is part of the subtle body. And there's the covering of the soul. The subtle body is a covering of the soul. So how does the soul get rid of that subtle covering? By bhakti. This question Devahuti is asking is, so like, hey, I know the philosophy, I'm not this body. And then I go about my activities as if I'm this body. And aside from doing my duties that are assigned because of my body type, I'm a Brahmana or Kshatriya or Vaishya or Shudra, I'm Arjuna, so I do what Krishna says, I go into the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Or I carry out the prescribed duties of a Kshatriya. And if I think that's who I am, that's a contamination. But if I don't think that's who I am, but still I have this nature, this antakarana thing, according to my past activities, I have a certain nature. So I act according to my nature. I acknowledge, I honor that nature, but I don't identify with it. So how do you not identify with it? By bhakti. And how do you purify it and elevate it? By bhakti. And by bhakti requires this prolonged hearing. That's what it says here. Tivraya mai bhaktya cha shruta samvritaya chiram. The word chiram means long time. Like the word chira is used sometimes there's a certain group of living entities that live for a long time. Like Lord Brahma lives for a long time. Or Vyasadeva, the empowered incarnation of the Lord, he lives for a long time. Or Parashara Muni, he speaks in Vishnu Purana that 2 yuga cycles ago, he was Vyasa. So he's one of those. He lives for a long time. Or it's in the songs that we sing. See the Supreme Lord for a long time. Chiram. So engage in the process of hearing for a long time. Don't be impatient. Expect that it's going to take a long time. Why is it going to take a long time? Because we're attached. We're attached to the temporary. Although we're trying to do that which is to get us beyond the temporary, we're attached to the temporary. The desire is weak, and the attachment to the temporary is strong. But can we get beyond it? Yes, by bhakti. There's a certain kind of bhakti. Tivraya mai bhaktya cha. By devotional service unto me, that's tivraya. He's used the word here, serious. It's like, very strong. Tivra bhakti. Any of our younger devotees here in the front row? Satya. Do you know the verse? Tivra bhakti. Do you know that verse? Okay. Do you know the verse? Akama, sarvakamova, mokshakama, udaradi, tivrena bhakti yogena. Sound familiar? Yajeta purusham param. So whatever your condition is, akama, no material desire. Sarvakama, all material desire. Or mokshakama, you want liberation. What's the best thing? Tivra bhakti. Why? Because Tivra Bhakti dissolves everything that's not in relation to Krishna, or excuse me, not favorable for Krishna. The affinity, it's like this affinity for the soul thinking that which is proximate to me, this covering, starting with the subtle covering, subtle covering, the antar karana, subtle, because before there's gross activity, there's always some contemplation on the subtle plane, thinking, feeling, willing before acting. Even Plato said it. He gives this long-winded, boring thing about a chair. Before there was a chair, there was an idea of a chair. Very simple. But he gets really long-winded about it. So where did the idea of chair come from? But anyway, before there's activity, there's the contemplation. It may be quick, but there's something on the subtle plane. The antar karana is active before the external senses, knowledge-acquiring senses, working senses. It starts with the mind. So purifying the mind. Here it's amala atmana. So how do we go making the atmana, the subtle antarkarana, cleansed by Tivra Bhakti? Specifically, it's Tivra Shruta, sustained hearing. Here's what the translation again. One can get liberation by seriously discharging devotional service unto me, and thereby hearing for a long time about me or from me. Thus, by executing one's prescribed duties, there will be no reaction. We will do our duties without identifying with ourselves as the doer of those duties. Exactly what Krishna says not to do. Don't think of yourself as the cause of the results of your activities. That's chapter 5. Neither consider yourself the performer of work, nor consider yourself the cause of the reactions or the products of those activities, nor consider yourself to be inducing others to act, which pretty much make up the sum total of material existence. We create results, and we try to get other people to help us or do something. Think of the office, or whatever is going on, family, or whatever is going on. It's what's going on. What's the alternative to thinking that way? The alternative is bhakti. We do the duties, and we fix our mind upon Krishna by that process of sustained hearing. And that sustained hearing helps inspire bhakti. And bhakti unto whom? The inspiration for the unto whom part is hearing the glories of the object of our devotion. His qualities, his form, his activities, certainly his name, sustained over a period of time. With faith. There's a nice description in what constitutes sadhana. Really like it. 3 things. Dirgha kal. It's regularly, like satatam. Nityam bhagavata sevaya, like that. Hearing regularly. And then for a long time. Don't be impatient, it takes time. It takes time because we're attached. The covering is thick, and we're attached to it. And we're very proximate to it, like Devahuti is saying. So, sustained over time. And then the third is the intention, the faith, or the conviction that by this hearing, and then the application of what I hear, then I'll become benefited. Now let me just read this coincidental thing from, we just recited a verse from chapter 27. Here's one from chapter 29, where the same idea is presented. Text 18. The mind, adhyatmika, the mind should become purified by continually hearing about the good and bad qualities of the antakarana, which isn't us, it's the subtle covering. So hearing about the good and bad qualities of our existence, our internal existence, by chanting my names, by sincere association with great devotees without pride. This is Vishwanath's commentary. The mind should become purified by continually hearing about the good and bad qualities of the antakarana. He puts in parentheses, what does that mean? The internal sense, the subtle body, the refined and concentrated intelligence. To perform bhakti using the antakarana, one must hear about its good and bad qualities. Understanding one has bad qualities, like pride, one can conquer those bad qualities by worship of great devotees. The devotee should engage in such a practice. So, my dear devotees, there's hope for us. Although there's so much involved in matter, there's every hope we can get free from the entanglement of matter. And not only freed from the entanglement of matter, but according to what Kapila Dev says next, it's really nice. Bhakti has the power to dissolve, not only cleanse, but dissolve the subtle contaminations, including the mind itself and false ego itself. I'll read his translation. By energetic bhakti, to me, for a long time, without desire for results, this animita nimitena, which purifies the heart and is performed according to one's occupational duties, by knowledge with realization of the elements, by strong renunciation, by yoga, by intense concentration on the Lord, the subtle body of the jiva burns continually and gradually disappears, like the kindling stick is consumed by fire. Meaning, there's this, the body is like a glove, the subtle body is like the hand that's inside the glove, and then there's the power of the senses. Supposing you have a dead body, there's a hand and there's a glove over the hand, but nothing happens. When there's power given, it's adidaivaka, that the demigods give power of the senses, then the hand can move and then the glove moves. So we're identifying with the glove or with the hand and thinking I'm the doer. But actually there's a permitter of all of this, and bhakti means to give our attention to that permitter of all of this while we're doing this. And specifically by the process to keep the mind fixed there by regularly hearing. And when by regularly hearing, the purification takes place. As bhakti rises, or as the flame of devotion rises, the cleansing of the contaminations of the antakarana takes place. Then the contemplation is simply how to engage in service of Krishna that's favorable to him. That's bhakti. Anukulyena Krishnanushalana. That's bhakti. Cultivation of that which is favorable to Krishna. Just during Christmas holiday, we had this whole discussion on the 6 limbs of surrender, and certainly right up there, accepting things favorable, rejecting things unfavorable. For what purpose? For increasing bhakti. So we can always remember Krishna. The mind is always with Krishna. That antakarana goes to Krishna. Like when we're chanting, not just making a sound, but the concentration of extending conscious awareness to the sound, or to the deity, or to the soul within the devotee, and the bhakti that's within the devotee. Those things that are in this world that are spiritual, appreciate them with acceptance and devotion. We wish to serve the devotees. It's one of the 5 most potent things in all of the possibilities of doing things in service to Krishna. One of the 5 most potent things. We don't see, in the beginning stages, naturally, we don't see things that are spiritual as spiritual. It's one of the effects of being a covered and conditioned soul. But the hearing process, hearing, chanting, and from that, the service that's rendered, mindful of Krishna, it going back to Devahuti's question, it can dissolve that connection. Bhakti has that power. One last thing, and I'm going to end. See if there's discussion. Part of this contemplation comes from the discussion at the Japa retreat we just held in central New Jersey, and the feedback from persons who attended. Most of the persons that offered feedback expressed some special strength that came to them from chanting without upadis, because he went through this whole thing of what upadis is. And then this little exercise of chanting and watching the mind and seeing when the mind does go to the holy name, the upadi thing, the coverings of who we think we are, the designations of self go away. While we have one, it fades in significance, and when we're not focused on the holy name, that's what goes on. So that's an interesting exercise, and very sincerely, as if I've benefited a lot just from that subject myself since the Japa retreat, and just focusing and focusing and focusing and focusing and focusing on what we're supposed to be focusing on, and making very concentrated effort to just let the other thing go. If it appears, just let it go, and focus on the sound. And the bhakti, because it's not a mechanical thing, it's an instruction thing to hear the holy name without sarvopadi vanir muktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam. Bhaktir is a definition of bhakti. Bhaktir uchate. That's what bhakti is. Sarvopadi vanir muktam starts right there. The mechanical effort is insufficient. The mind will go to upadis again and again because there's affinity for that. Bhakti can dissolve it. It has the power. Nothing else has the power. So the effort must be there, But the effort in devotion is what really makes it happen. And that is, Krishna sees the sincere effort. Krishna helps that sincere effort. That's bhakti. Trying to please Krishna. Krishna sees one trying to please him. He helps that someone. Just share this little thing, it'll end. After that 64 round day experience, I was sitting in the back room preparing for the final presentation in the evening. One gentleman came. I had never met him before. And he said, I want to share something with you. Can I have 3 minutes of your time? He said, I've been involved in Krishna consciousness for 5 or 6 years. And I really haven't applied myself in ways that I believe that I could and I should. I guess I'm just lazy and distracted. There have been a few other japa retreats, but I never went out of my way to attend them. But I came to this one, so I came. And my habit is I chant 8 rounds a day. And even my 8 rounds a day are distracted rounds, are not really good rounds. But I came to this thinking, well, let me try anyway. So it wasn't like he didn't have these super inflated expectations. He just let me try anyways. And I heard that first evening on this, we're not this body, and we should think of, as we're chanting, that's who we are, and we're chanting from the position of the soul. And I thought, that sounds right. It resonates. So I started trying like that. No, excuse me. I chanted 16 rounds. I never chanted 16 rounds before, and it was really easy. And then I thought, okay, well, let me try chanting another 16 rounds. And chanted 32 rounds, and it was really easy. Said, well, let me go for it. I'll try 64 rounds. And then it started getting really hard. I said, because I was thinking I was the doer. I was going to chant 64 rounds. Then I remembered what you said about, we're spirit soul, and you let go of these designations of things like thinking I'm the doer. So I meditated on, yes, that's who I really am. And the chanting took on a quality, it was kind of mystical. He said, I started feeling light, like I was going to float in the air. Or he said, I don't know, if more like a bubble on the ocean. And it was such a nice feeling. And then as I was appreciating what a nice feeling, the feeling went away. Then I was trying to get the feeling back, but the feeling didn't come back. Then I went back to, I'm not this body. I'm spirit soul. Let me just chant from the soul. And it came again. And it lasted for a long time. So I was not trying to be the enjoyer of that. It was just, Krishna is very kind. It was really mystical. So now I know, all the time devotees talk about chanting 16 rounds. It's certainly possible. I chanted 64, I can chant 16. And that higher consciousness is accessible. But that's this animita nimitena, included just in our chanting. We're doing something, but we're the instrument. We're using the language here, the passive performer. Devahuti's language, the passive performer. We're the karta and the cheshta, we're making some endeavor, and there's the senses and there's a place of activity, and ultimately there's super soul. So when chanting, or that's the very, very, very superlatively best method of going beyond false ego and the implications in our own contamination, being stuck. So I'm appealing to this nice example. We're meant not only to chant, but to chant progressively, to make progress in our Krishna consciousness. And these instructions specifically, hear instructions from the scripture. I'm going to be speaking about this again sometime during this weekend. I think tomorrow evening. how to hear from the scripture in such a way it goes in. It's not just hear it, oh, that was nice, and then business as usual, no transformation. But how transformation, coming to a higher position, an evolved position of Krishna consciousness, awakened condition, where consciousness is reaching out to the instruction, just like Vishwanath is saying here. The good and the bad aspects of the antakarana, so we can exercise the good ones, become aware of the bad ones, and overcome them, specifically, he says, by serving in the association of advanced souls. Specifically, how he describes. There's a method, the bhakti method, and there's hope. It's the Bhagavatam's message gives us that hope or faith or conviction. We can go beyond our own limitations. We should. Krishna wants. Know that Krishna wants, and he's giving the method. Take it. Any discussion or questions?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I think you said by understanding the good and bad qualities of the antakarana, that same verse, then one practices, bhakti with the understanding that, okay, I have this bad quality, and then you're able to get rid of it because you're able to recognize it. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, specifically, there's potency in the sound vibration that comes from the proper source. And we should hear from that proper source. And that the potency sheds light on both. Go ahead.
So if you're not able to, if you don't see something wrong with you, then would you necessarily not be able to get rid of it?
Well, something will be there because of the sound. If the sound vibration is a pure sound vibration or shabda, something's going to happen anyway. But the full benefit isn't going to happen. The full benefit is using the context of the Kapila Deva speaking. The subtle covering dissolves eventually. It gets purified and it dissolves. So behind the material mind is the spiritual mind, the thoughts that are with Krishna. Behind the material intelligence, there's spiritual intelligence, the glove in the hand that moves. So there's spiritual, the spiritual form that becomes revealed through the power of bhakti. The covering becomes dissolved and the spiritual identity becomes evident or disclosed, uncovered. Does that address your question?
I was just thinking specifically, like, let's take, for example, something like pride. If you don't recognize pride in yourself, I don't know, maybe you might have said it, but I didn't catch it. If you don't recognize that you have pride, then how can you get rid of it?
Well, you won't. I mean, some benefit. I got carried away with my thought on this topic and didn't directly address your question. Something will be there, but not the full getting rid of the pride because I don't recognize that I have it, as you said. And it has very much to do with the quality of our hearing. When the quality of the hearing becomes better, then the light, the illumination on the purpose for which the sound vibration is given, the edification and purification, the medicine will illumine that pride, and then we can address it through that sound vibration, not on our own effort. Through bhakti, wishing to serve according to the indication. So then we turn to great souls, specifically, and in their association, freed from pride, through their strength plus our effort, their mercy and our effort, we can go beyond it. But yes, go back to your question. If we don't see that it's there, how are we going to go beyond it? So, while you have something?
On the same line, Guru Maharaj, just this that you mentioned, I was just thinking when I heard that
Thinking about the which?
when you read it, when I heard
When you heard it.
same of associating with a pure devotee, or with actually the word was worshiping
It says that, yeah.
the great devotees, in terms of having to spend long time hearing to be able to have an effect of dissolving that. So my questions is it's very easy the situation of not fully understanding how to associate with the great devotees and how to worship. And I was just thinking specifically of the example of Ekalavya, that I had this question from the Christmas retreat of
I remember.
yeah, Ekalavya having, actually he worshiped Dronacharya, and in fact I'm assuming for quite some time, and achieved the desired result, achieved something, but it was not really pleasing to the great devotee. So the situation of not having a clear understanding of how to serve and associate with the great devotees, and losing the opportunity. How we can avoid that, or we can be aware of that, or is it something that can happen very easily in our attempt?
A simple litmus test is our attention going to Krishna, or in the Bhagavatam's language, Vishvaksena Kataruchi, the eagerness for hearing the glorification of the Supreme Lord. When there's opportunity to hear the glorification of Supreme Lord, we become energized, we become enlivened, we become attracted. And if that's not there, that's a sign that it's coming from some other place. Or at least we need more purification until we're at that stage. But we should see we will want to see, at least, we want to see some progress in that connection of eagerness to hear. And when the eagerness to hear fades, that's a warning signal. And the eagerness to be in the company of advanced souls, for whatever the reason the mind may say, that that's another warning signal. Does that address your question? Okay. Yeah, Adamungo.
My question is more like a clarification for what Mukunda has asked. So, in order to understand or apply the principle of antakarana that you have explained, it is not that we deliberately try to, or in other words, to say in a positive sense, focus is on Krishna while hearing, but not so much on what am I lacking or what are my anarthas. Is that correct? Or
It's not one thing to the exclusion of the other thing. The end result is we want our mind to go to Krishna. So that's like the point of the pin, and then there's the shaft of the pin. So it's not one to the exclusion of the other. We only want the point, we only want the shaft. We want the point and the shaft. So the specific part that because the goal is always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. Our consciousness is with Krishna. That's at the front. That's the objective. Something that may be interfering with that or assisting that is how the antakarana is set up. And there'll be something in there that's an asset. There'll be something there that's a detriment. And by the process of hearing, back to his question, we can, by the process of hearing, identify. It's the introspection is through the agency of hearing. pure sound vibration. And then we can, illumination is there. And naturally it's going to be gradual, and naturally it's also going to be proportionate to our eagerness for, where the point of the pin is. It can be just, I don't want to suffer. And then suffering becomes reduced to some degree. Now go back to complacency. So that the objective, the mission of life, it's right in the front, and it stays in the front. And the means to achieve it is then also the 9 processes of bhakti. Now, how do we engage in the hearing process? This is the shaft of the pin, so to speak. Hearing with that purpose. This is instruction from Krishna meant for me. Not about them. It's about me and how I can, Krishna's giving, or here Kapila Deva is giving, the opportunity through the hearing process by his speaking Devahuti and Vyasadeva writing it and so on and so on. Prabhupada translating it. It's giving us the opportunity for purification so that we can come to that stage. Because there's an obstacle. I'm attached to the temporary. I'm attached to my contaminations. And for how many lifetimes, who knows? But I wish to go beyond that. I wish to come to the stage of simply being devoted to Krishna. Amala Atmana. I'm striving like that, and then one can get to that stage. When one gets to that stage, then the material mind dissolves. Not only gets purified. Okay?
Thank you.
In the front here.
You were saying, in your response to Mukunda, you were saying how through the hearing process, the qualities and the faults of the Antakarana are illumined.
Well, it's what he says.
Yes, Maharaj. So my question is, I'm thinking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song, Gurudev. At the end he says, if you look inside of me, you'll find no good qualities, you'll only find faults. And if there's any good qualities, it's by the mercy of you. And if you don't be merciful, I'm going to cry. So is it true that, so that's true, that any good quality we might look inside of ourselves, it is simply a product of mercy.
Well,
That would help us
how
towards
devotee
Krishna.
thinks. The soul has its natural good qualities. The purification of the soul comes by the mercy of the purifying agents. But the soul has its own natural good qualities. So if you find some good qualities, because I become purified. So that's another way of saying the same. If you find good qualities, you put them there. It's an expression of humility. I'm an unqualified person. If there's any qualification, you put it there. Humility. Appropriate humility. But in the transcendental sense, the other part of what I said is the soul has its natural qualities. Krishna decorates souls with qualities, especially his devotees.
So in addition to having our faults, or not what us we are, but the Antakarana portion that's got all these faults, getting more clarity about that.
And qualities.
And qualities. So we should also be very clear about what our strengths are.
Yeah.
And
Exercise
that take us to Krishna.
Yeah. Well, you use them in Krishna's service. The strength should be used in Krishna's service, not in the sense of doer, but the sense of Krishna's giving, Krishna's empowering, and be used in Krishna's service. Someone can sing nicely. They should sing nicely. Someone can manage nicely. They should manage nicely. Someone can cook nicely. Cook nicely.
Those are more skills, and then there's a
Well, behind the activity, there's something. But I mean, a lot of devotees are really raving about I'm going to read it. when I go for my Ayurvedic treatment. You read the Jamuna's book, Life of Devotion. But she had a natural gift for singing. But behind that, who knows how many lifetimes she had been engaged in singing. There's a little boy. How old is Balaram? In the Potomac congregation. There's a little boy. I mean, he's little. He didn't take any music lessons. He just sings for hours at the harmonium. He listens to songs. He learns the songs. And he plays harmonium. The harmonium's bigger than him. So that's an ability, but there's an attraction for the holy name, as well as the musical part of the holy name. So that's there. He's using it. Everyone's amazed. They go. He goes out in Harinam. There's 70 devotees in Harinam, and he's singing. The public goes, wow, look at that. It's very powerful. He they just go on and on and on and on and on and on for hours. It's hard to unplug them. We have a whole program. We have to, go take your shot, and we have to keep singing. So there's subtle and the activity, the external activity, but it's the internal activity that's an asset that can be utilized. Somebody's, inclined to bookkeeping. So there's the activity, but there's some inclination for that kind of detail, and some people have no interest at all in that. So there's subtle and there's the activity as well. And then you do that for Krishna consciousness, because somebody can use something that haven't, but not for Krishna. On the right side, anything? Okay, looks like we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.